Mr. Calvin Johnson. How are you, sir?
Doing well, doing well.
Thank you so much for being here. So I always start here, Mr. Johnson. This happens March. I'm sorry. Well, this happens in March of '83 when you actually go behind bars. But before the accusations and everything happens, tell me the young man that you were back in the day before all this happened to you.
Well, I think I was a pretty good young man. I mean, I admit I was a little bit wilder. I like to have fun. I was doing things that a lot of young people today are doing, but it can get you in trouble. I mean, I used to smoke marijuana and drink a little bit, but I was a college student. I went to college, went to Clark Atlanta University, and graduated from Clark Atlanta University, and which was Clark College at the time, back at that time, and got a degree in mass communications. I had great parents. My mom was an administrative assistant at college, and my dad, he did different jobs since he moved to Atlanta, but he had several, good jobs. But my dad when I used to live in Ohio before I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. My dad was actually the first black state senator of Hamilton County back in the '60s in Ohio. So I come from a good stock, good stock. So you say, wow, hey, we think that this just happens to certain type of people, but no, I was college educated, and it happened to me. Yeah, it can happen to anybody, and it was one of those things where I was basically a good kid. I enjoyed life, had fun, was always working, had a job, but despite all that, got into a little bit of trouble on the wrong side. I actually did something I didn't have any business doing. By me smoking marijuana, I got into some trouble and got arrested one time, and didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer. Had some friends on the wrong side of town talked me into doing something I shouldn't have done. I committed a crime, which was a burglary back then, and actually got arrested and ended up doing a little bit of time. I did about a year and a half. Got out, and that's when the nightmare began, just to kind of get you started. The same police officers that had arrested me back then and tried to charge me with some bogus charges was with rape. And only thing that really saved me back then was the person that committed the rape was uncircumcised. And I've been
Mm,
circumcised since birth because I was born in the Jewish hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that
yeah,
saved me back then. But those same police officers had them made up in their mind that, oh, we're going to get them. We're going to get them.
right.
So
We're
when
gonna
I
get him
got
no
out,
matter what.
they were waiting
Yeah.
on me.
So let me just say this. This story is just wild. So
It is
you're
wild.
leaving work. It's wild. You're leaving work. You're walking down the street. You see like a wooded area and you get like a strange, weird feeling, but you're just walking down the street. You kind of just dismiss it. You go home. You're at your house. 5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, there's a knock at your door and the police arrest you. You're literally in your home, just living your life. You're coming from work, and they knock on your door, they arrest you, and then you're charged with 2 counts of rape. And to make the story even stranger is that the victim, there's a lineup. The victim picks out somebody else, but yet they're still saying that you're the person. Then there's another person that through this suggestive kind of lineup kind of says, okay, well, I guess that's him. And you are caught up in this system. I think what's so striking is literally leaving work, walking down the street, going your home, and you're arrested. What are your thoughts when you see these same police officers who you dealt with before accusing you of rape when you just got done walking down the street?
I'm going to be totally honest with you. At that particular time, I actually, the way I was brought up, I had faith in the justice system at that time. Now I don't have that same faith anymore, but I believe that basically that they would realize that they made a mistake. That they would realize it. Now it was a nightmare. I mean, I was scared. I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but I kept thinking in my mind that any minute they're going to realize and recognize that, hey, we got the wrong person, and they're going to set free Calvin C. Johnson Jr. But it didn't happen like that. They threw me into that dark, damp cell. They handcuffed me so tight that I got scars on my wrist today. And they didn't beat me or anything, but it's just the way they treated me like I was inhuman, like I was some type of animal. and they threw me into the cell and didn't even tell me why I was being arrested. I didn't even know it till the next morning. And that's when they told me that I was being charged with 2 rapes. And I'm like, no, no, you got the wrong person. There's no way. There's no way. I didn't do it. But they took me to the little preliminary hearing, which is like a mini trial. And through that course, through the preliminary hearing, they held me. And I even thought that they were going to let me go during the hearing because there are a lot of things that were brought out. It was more evidence that was brought out that was in my favor, showing that, hey, you got the wrong person. But none of that made any difference in Clayton County, Georgia at the time, because Clayton County, Georgia at the time was a predominantly white county. And I had ended up with an all white jury, and the victim of this crime happened to be white.
And what was crazy is that the victim said that the person who did this had no facial hair. You had a full beard, and there was no way you could have grown out your beard that quickly. Like you had a full beard, and they still and the victim said no facial hair. I gotta ask you this because the victim's in the courtroom, and I was reading your story. They do this dramatic thing where point out the person who did this, and they go to you, Mr. Johnson. Do you think, because obviously the prosecutor, the police, they're out to get you for whatever reason, racism, whatever it is, they feel like you're an easy target. But do you think the victim knew that you were innocent? Do you think she really knew that? Do you think she knew that you were innocent, considering all the evidence that's coming out right in front of her? Do you think she knew that she was wrongfully accusing somebody?
I think in her mind she was hurt and that she just wanted to get a black man because it was a black man that committed the crime, and she just wanted a black man. She didn't care who it was, just so long as a black man was punished for the crime. And that's how I feel. I don't know in her heart if she actually knew. She may have had some doubts. But by the time the police end up, influencing her, I mean, even during the preliminary hearing, before I ever went to trial, they asked her, how did you identify Mr. Johnson? She said from a photograph. They sat there and they asked her. They said, well, what type of photographs? Were they color, black and white, or what? And she said, kind of hesitate, I think they were color. Okay. The police come in right behind her and we asked him, do you have the photographs that you showed to this young lady? And they were black and white, a series of black and white photos. Even in the live lineup at that particular time, she picked out another individual, another black man, and signed an affidavit to that effect. She did that, but none of that made any difference. No description, as you said, of facial hair. I had a full beard. And my employer come testified I had a full beard. Had an employee ID picture showing that I had a full beard. Had friends and family to testify I had a full beard. None of this made any difference. So did she know or not know? I don't know. It's hard for me to say what's going through a person's mind after a tragic incident like that in their life. But I think she may have had some doubts, but it just didn't make any difference. I'm a black man, so what the heck? Put me in jail so she could be
Yeah.
happy and satisfied, said he got somebody.
And what are you thinking in this moment? Just take me to where your heart, where your soul, where your spirit was. You're a young man. It's an all white jury, a predominantly white area. What are you thinking? Are you thinking you're doomed? I mean, how is your heart getting through this?
It was very hurtful. My heart hurted extremely a lot. I don't know if I can really describe it, but it started off with a lot of hope. It started off where I kept constantly believing that any minute they're going to realize that they made a mistake. As I said earlier, when they took the blood samples and the blood samples from my body and the blood samples came back O positive and over 40% of the population is O positive, they figured, hey, well, we must have the right person because I'm O positive. But when the hair samples came back, they belonged to somebody of African American ancestry, but the hair samples didn't even match me. They
Didn't
didn't
match
match
you.
me. And I'm sitting there, and it was humiliating how they got the hair samples. They got me in a room, butt naked, with the doors wide open, plucking from my body anywhere they want to pluck from. But they come back not matching Calvin C. Johnson Jr. I'm thinking then, oh wow, they're gonna realize, they made a mistake. But the day that we made the jury selection, and they struck the few blacks that were on the jury. And I looked in the eyes of the all-white jury. I looked in the eyes of the prosecutor, and it looked like I was looking at the devil himself. And when I looked into the eyes and looked into his eyes, my heart just sunk and it just hit me. I said, wow. I got real sad. I said, they're gonna railroad me. I said, they're gonna railroad me for something I didn't do. And that's when it was that heavy feeling, knowing that. And I was sadder for my family than me, because I knew how I was gonna hurt my mother. I was gonna hurt my father. I had a fiance at the time, how that was gonna be ruined. My whole life changed in just a split second.
Wow. Wow. And you are charged with rape, aggravated assault, burglary, and your original sentence is life plus 15 plus 15 plus 15. You go behind bars March 14th, 1983. You are 25 years old when you go behind bars. So you were briefly behind bars before, but what were your survival skills like? I mean, you're there wrongfully. Uh, what how are you managed to get by uh, being behind bars this time around? A totally different circumstance, being accused of rape. From what I've heard, when you're accused of sexual assault, you're treated terribly behind bars. So how are you surviving? How are you getting by, especially in the beginning?
Normally, people don't really talk about their case or why they're there behind bars, but I mean, people do find out what you're there for. Uh, I was a decent sized guy. I'm not a small guy. So while I was in prison, the one of the things I did was I lifted a lot of weights. I used to do that just to relieve tension, just to get the stress off of me, just to deal with the emotions. So that once I lifted the weights all day long, I'm just so tired that I don't want to do anything, don't get in any trouble, and just quit thinking about things. It was hard. I had photographs of my girlfriend. I had photographs of my family. I had photographs of things when I was younger, as growing up, and it got to where I couldn't even look at my photographs anymore because I didn't know what my future was going to be. And so I just took it all and just sent it out, just got rid of it because I couldn't look at it. And it's not easy during time. You have to survive. And time is what I mean. When you're doing prison time, is one of those things where, like you said, the strong prey upon the weak. If you are weak, they're going to take advantage of you. If you're weak, you can be molested. You can be, have people. They can have people sending money to them. Anything can happen. But being the fact that I used to lift weights, I was strong. I had a decent build back then. Back then, I'm okay now.
You
But
good. You
I had
good.
a I had a decent build back then. I was a pretty strong young man. I kept to myself basically. I really did keep to myself. And there were a few incidents where people did try me. What I mean by try me, where I had physical confrontations, and I came out the better half in those confrontations. And in prison, that earns respect. I mean, it's a sad way to earn respect. To have to hurt somebody to earn respect, but you earn respect. And so once I earned my respect, of course, they'll pick on an easier target. They don't want to pick on somebody that they might come out on the bad end. So they pick on the easier targets. Those people that are easier targets get taken advantage of. And it was years that went by, and finally I got myself together and started, giving my life over to God and reading the Bible and doing things like that. I just felt like, I was protected. I had my protection. You know, everybody has their own way of being protected, but I felt protected. And I did the 16 years. I was able to come out, even though there were times where I felt like a rubber band about to go crazy, just being pulled to just say pow, and I just snapped. I held on. I held on to that little flicker of hope that some kind of way they're gonna find out that I shouldn't even be here. But I did my time like a convict. They call them inmates now, but we were called convicts. I did my time like a convict. I didn't do any snitching or anything like that. I did hang out with the guys when I lifted weights or whatever we did, and I just did the time the way you're supposed to do time. I stayed to myself and did it. And it wasn't easy. There were a lot of difficult situations, like when you go before the parole board and they ask you stuff like, "Hey, Mr. Johnson, can you tell us about your situation?" And you say you're innocent, and they look at you like you're crazy. They say, "Well, you've been convicted by your peers, by a group of people, So I said, okay, you say I've been convicted, but I'm telling you, I didn't do the crime. So they look at you and say, okay, Mr. Johnson, since you're not accepting responsibility for the crime, we're just going to leave you in here a little bit longer. And every time you come up before the parole board, they just set you off further and further and further. And then they tried to make you take all kind of programs. They got this program called sexual offender program,
which you refused to
SOP.
take because it would have made you when you got out, you would have had to register as a sex offender, and you refused to do that because you were innocent. That could have ruined your life, forever, having to register as a sex offender. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, 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 that's fine. But
Yeah.
that is so true. That is so true. They wanted me to take this SOP program, sexual offender program, which you to complete the program. I actually sat in there for a while, tried to take the program. And then they told me, they said to continue to complete this program, you had to sign an admission of guilt. Now, these guys go to that program, they sign an admission of guilt. The Department of Corrections say, okay, you've been rehabilitated. Now you're ready to return to society. I'm like, okay, oh, yeah, right. But they tell me to sign this, and I'm sitting there. I got people that love me, people that care about me, just want me to come home. They say, just sign it, play the game, just so you can get out. But I'm thinking to myself, what kind of life would I have? I haven't explained it to the counselor. The counselor says, well, if you don't sign it, you probably won't ever get out. And I'm sitting there, I said, wow, what am I going to do? I said, I can't sign a mission to guilt. What kind of life is that? I walk out of here and I go home and I walk out to the mailbox and the next door neighbor runs out and grabs the little child and runs in the house because they say, there goes that man. You know, that's no life. Nobody wants to hire you. Nobody wants you to work in their company or anything. I mean, it'd be terrible. So I made up my mind, and it was a hard decision. And I said to myself, I said, I'd rather die in prison
Mm.
than walk out of here a free man saying that I did something that I didn't do. That wouldn't have been any kind of life, and I couldn't do it.
Mr. Johnson, what was the most disturbing thing you saw in prison? You saw, or yeah.
What is the most disturbing thing? Now, I saw a lot of disturbing things. Uh, I seen guys get jumped on, beat down, stabbed. Matter of fact, somebody got stabbed. We had double bunks. A guy got stabbed in the bed right below me one time. Uh, so you see a lot of disturbing things. You can be sitting in prison watching the television, and somebody doesn't like what's on the TV, and they just walk up, grab the TV, slam it on the ground, bust it because it's not what they want to watch. I mean, and then you have prison guards. In one prison I was in, the guards were very abusive, very abusive. They had tunnels in the bottom of the prison. They used to take guys down and beat them. And they did this so often that finally it got to a point where the guys just got tired. And so this is probably, out of all the things I saw, I was involved in a riot, a prison riot. They actually brought in the National Guard and everybody, right down in Milledgeville, or what you call it, was Hartwick, Georgia, was Rivers State Prison, and they tried to burn the prison down. But how can you? I can say we, but I mean, we tried to burn the prison down. I can't just say they. We tried to burn the prison down. But you can't burn a prison down that's made of concrete and steel. All it does is just put marks on the wall. But then they were putting those little plastic handcuffs because they didn't have enough handcuffs. They had those little wire wraps. They were handcuffing you together. And they were pushing people down steps, just down flights of stairs. Instead of letting them walk down, they would push them and slam them down and just abuse them, taking advantage of beating people. And it was some serious injuries during that ride. So that was probably one of the most disturbing, or was the most disturbing thing I saw as far as
Mm.
inhumane treatment in the whole time that I was incarcerated.
Mm. You are the first person exonerated in Georgia with DNA evidence. You are eventually released after 16 years behind bars. You're 41 years old on June 15th, 1999. First person released with DNA evidence in Georgia. And you also did a lot of advocacy where you fought to make sure they preserved evidence in Georgia. What a lot of folks may not know is once somebody is convicted, they just throw the evidence away. Like, oh, it's done, just throw it away, which makes it harder for folks who are wrongfully convicted. So you've done a lot of, you've made a lot of change in Georgia with that. Tell us about that moment when you're eventually exonerated and you will eventually have your freedom back.
That was a great day. It was a great day. It was the day when I remember my lawyers from New York, the Innocence Project in New York at the time. They came down. It was a gentleman named Peter Newfield, and a great guy, great lawyer, and he teamed up with Barry Sheck, who's another great lawyer out of New York area. And Peter came down and he was talking to me, and he said, "There's going to be a lot of media out there." And he said, "What are you going to do? What are you going to say?" And I just looked at him and I smiled. I said, "Don't worry, Peter. I won't embarrass you," like that. And then we went out, and of course, in the courtroom, there was a lot of media. My family was there. My mother couldn't be there because, sad to say, that shortly after I was incarcerated, my mother, it just broke her heart, and she suffered a stroke, and she had health problems throughout my entire time of being incarcerated. And it's really, really sad because that, when you're incarcerated and that happens, it just doesn't destroy you or affect you. It affects your entire family. It affects everybody. And so the first thing I wanted to do, the judge basically said I was free to go and everything, and people were trying to interview me, and the prosecutor, he did walk up to me. He shook my hand, but he never ever apologized. He didn't apologize. He just shook my hand and said, "Mr.
Mm,
Johnson, we felt at the time we were doing what was right." I wanted to hit him upside the head and say,
of
"You a doggone
course.
lie. You're just trying
Exactly.
to make yourself look good." But
That's right.
of course, I refrained from doing that. And since I refrained from doing that, and I, in my mind, had already gave everybody and was ready to move on with my life, the first thing I really wanted to do was go see my mom, who was bedridden at the time. She had a trachea in her throat, and I went to see her. And when I saw her, she had a little tear running down her cheek when she saw me because she was so happy. And that was a very, very, very great, beautiful moment at that particular time. And then I wanted some real food. So later on that night, I said, "Hey, let's go get some catfish or something." I want some food. I had had a good meal. And then the other thing I wanted to do was get in the bathtub. I ain't been in the bathtub in 16 years. So I,
Right.
wanted to get in the bathtub and relax. So there was a lot of things I wanted to do. And fortunately, I got to do it. And as you said, then I started getting involved with the Innocence Project, the one in New York, and then the Georgia started the project. I got involved with the Georgia Innocence Project, sat on the board of directors, and helped to change a few things, and was able to, like, as you said, to work on that law because they didn't, even my evidence had been thrown, was supposed to be destroyed. But fortunately, it wasn't. I look at it as a miracle that it wasn't destroyed. But so many people, just think of all the people whose evidence were destroyed and either were in prison for years for things they didn't do, or even maybe were on death row, because lots of people gotten off death row now for things that they didn't do based on DNA technology. But think of the ones that have been executed and never proven innocent. It's
Mm,
sad. It's sad.
it's very sad. Did the victim ever apologize? Ever say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong"? Anything?
I haven't had any contact with the victim. If the victim reached out to me, I would, that would be fine with me. I wouldn't ever try to approach the victim myself.
Right,
But
of course.
at the same time, I understand that something tragic did happen. Uh, but in my situation, though, there have been cases where, victims have made contact with the person, and they became friends or they worked together to, in different ways. But in my case, they try to say in this world of technology and all this everything we have with the media and computers and all this advanced equipment that we got, that they didn't know where the victim was. They had no contact with the victim. They didn't know where the victim was, if they were alive, not alive, or what. I'm like, what you mean you can't find somebody after all these years? So I just let it go at that and went on with my life.
Mr. Johnson, let me ask you this. I'm not even sure what the question is, but I just want to put it out there. I have done so many of these interviews, and it is always, not always, but I've done too many where it is a black man accused of raping a white woman. The black man doesn't even know the woman. The black man's never met the woman. Sometimes the black man never even heard of the case. Over and over, I keep hearing this, and I'm sure you're from the South, you're from Georgia, you know the history during Jim Crow of a black man accused of raping a white woman and he's lynched, right? Uh, why do you think this narrative is still prevalent today? I mean, there could be black men behind bars right now who were accused of raping a white woman and they never did. Uh, why do you think this is so prevalent today? Why do you think that this is still so much of a fear of this black man, fear of black men assaulting white women when the truth is most assaults happen within our own community. The 90-80% of the assaults is proximity to folks where we live. But this is a crazy, wild, irrational fear. People are suffering for it. What are your thoughts on that?
The only thing I can really say is that it's designed that way. It's been designed that way since back in the beginning of the time when they first brought blacks over here. That they wanted to instill this fear that we weren't even human, that we were animals. And over the years, they had portrayed it in movies. They have portrayed it in different ways. The media, even if you look at the government and the presidents and the laws they put in place, that are put in place to basically incarcerate uh, people that are black and Hispanic and so forth. And so they put out this thing and they get it and you see it on the news and they call us all kind of names and say we're predators and this and that. And people see this and they believe it. They believe what they see and hear that's being pumped out. And it's not the truth. So this thing is not over with. It's still going on today. It's a sad bit, but it's a prejudiced society that's structured where you say, well, what's going on? Is there a fear? Yes, there's a fear. Certain people want to still be in power. Certain people want to still be in control. And we're such an intelligent race of people. We have such a great culture that we have risen through all types of adversity and trials and tribulations. And when they see us succeeding like this in all areas, even in some of the highest areas of inventions and education, it's scary to them because they know they tried to hide the history, but they know what they've done. They know that they have raped and killed and destroyed economical areas such as different towns and gone in and massacred hundreds of blacks at one time uh, because they just felt like it was like they were I don't basically they felt like why are we allowing them to get economically strong. They don't want that. They don't want that. So I say this: everybody's not a bad person. There's
Right,
good
of
people. There's
course.
bad people of all
Definitely.
race.
That's right.
And so I'm not trying to be prejudiced or anything because
Of course. Yeah.
there was some great white people that helped me. But
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
same time, if you look at society, the United States as as a whole, there's still some serious issues with prejudice, discrimination, and we see it every single day. And this has been designed from way back, and it's been going on for years.
I mean, to your point, Mr. Johnson, the city with the highest rate of rape and sexual assault is Anchorage, Alaska. No, people don't realize that where there's little to no black folks, and
Wow.
black men are turned into sexual predators in the news and media. Anchorage, Alaska, is the city with the highest rate of rape and sexual assault.
Mm.
Do the math. Before you go, we have to head out soon. Tell us about your book, Exit to Freedom.
Exit to Freedom was the very first book written by anybody that was free based on DNA technology. And it came out back in 2003. It is on Amazon.com and it's under my name, Calvin C. Johnson Jr., along with a guy named Dr. Greg Hampikian, who helped me to write it, who's actually a DNA expert now. And he does a lot of big cases with DNA technology. And the book it tells my whole life. It talks about my upbringing. It talks about the things I went through, the good, the bad, the ugly. I tell everything. I don't hide anything. I put it all out for everybody to see and everybody to read. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because anytime you write a book, you want to be the hero. You don't want to tell the bad stuff. But despite anything in my life, the main point is that I was wrongfully accused and convicted of a crime that I didn't commit. And no matter what trials and tribulations you go through, if you believe and you persevere and don't give up, there's always hope. And you can change your life for the better. You can overcome anything that's happened. It's not what happened yesterday, it's what you're doing now. And now affects tomorrow. So keep that in mind when you think about, wow, I'm not going to be able to do this. Don't ever say what you're not going to be able to do because you can do it. I'm a living proof that I got out of prison and I didn't look back. I didn't forget. I educate people about what I went through, but at the same time, I'm moving forward, looking to each and every day of my life, and I'm very thankful for it.
Well said. And the state of Georgia did compensate you, correct?
They compensated. Oh, that was rough. I finally got $500,000 out of the state of Georgia, which is a joke.
That's it.
A joke for 16 years of being incarcerated. It didn't last very long. I didn't know what to do with it, but I did get it. And they tried to give me they one time they only tried to give me $100,000. But some kind of way I asked for over $1 million. But even $1 million cannot replace the years lost. I missed the 80s, all the 80s and the 90s and times of people when people are growing in their life, having children, having a family. I didn't get to spend the Christmases or the holidays, or if somebody passes away, you don't get to do any of those things. So you miss a
Mr.
lot.
Johnson, $500,000 for 16 years. That's about $31,000 a year. That
Yeah.
that's that's $31,000 a year. If they would have never wrongfully locked you up, maybe you would have been making, uh, six figures by the time you were 30, by the time you were 35, by the time you were 40. $31,000 a year. That's just despicable. Like that's just
And,
crazy.
and, and here's the sad part. I'm 64 years old. When you're incarcerated and you look at your social security statement, all those years of incarceration are blank. They have zeros. So you might get some social security and might not, depending on if you have worked since you've been out. But it's not a good picture. So you say, well, who's going to take care of you when you get old? Well, I know guys right now that are asking themselves that same question as they're getting older in life, that have been falsely accused for things they didn't do. So
But before you
we're working on it in Georgia, trying to get a compensation law passed. But right now they do not have a set compensation in Georgia as of yet.